Jim Harbaugh and Michigan descend upon Detroit, as well as several other Big Ten coaches, Big 12 coaches, coaches from all over the country to see Bryce Underwood and others at SoundMind SoundBody. That and Will Johnson's camp on the next Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
I'm going to go ahead and say happy Thursday, even though by the time that anyone watches or listens to this, except for maybe a very small handful, it will be Friday. I did put the warning out on Twitter this was going to be very late once I realized how late it was going to be. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I was your man on the ground twice today. And part of it was from a lack of planning, because no, I shouldn't say a lack of planning. It was a sense of confusion because I did not realize, as did not some others who I spoke to, that SoundMind SoundBody and the Will Johnson camp were two very separate things in the same location. They even had some overlap. So I had to leave once we spoke to Jim Harbaugh and come back home to let Zuri out and drive right back to Detroit. But we are going to get into a bunch of the really interesting things that came. I need a little of the Taco Bell juice here. It's kind of night it is. Just because it has been about 14 hours worth of collecting data, seeing things. So the first thing I want to get to is the whole of the SMSB. It is a different type of scenario. It's kind of back to what it used to be. And I think that that's important for recruiting aspects. Curtis Blackwell does an incredible job and continues to do an incredible job. And then we're going to get into Jim Harbaugh. And then we're going to get into to the little bit of the camp, the last camp, the Will Johnson camp. So I want to start with the SMSB because this is one of the things that will really truly benefit Michigan if it can continue to rise again. Certainly it had some benefits back when Jim Harbaugh took over. It was not a good scenario for Brady Hoke, right? We all probably remember the barbecue, him having barbecue with, I think it was Mark D'Antonio. And it just did not, it seemed like it was sad that he was there. MSU was trending upwards. Michigan was trending downwards. My first SMSB was 2015. MSU was coming off of a Big Ten championship. Mark D'Antonio was actually all smiles instead of my joke that he was. But I mean, it was just an event because you had the entire Michigan staff with Jim Harbaugh having just taken over. You had the entire Ohio State staff with Urban Meyer and literally everyone. You had the entire Michigan State staff, the entire Penn State staff, the entire Notre Dame staff. It was just an event, right? And then on top of it, you had 5 stars galore, 4 stars galore. I mean, we were watching reps, even though some of them were a couple years out. I'm watching reps between Donovan Peoples-Jones and Ambry Thomas. I'm watching reps between, I forget his name, but there was another standout corner from Cass Tech. Ambry Thomas obviously had switched from Cass Tech to King. No, I'm thinking of, Lavert Hill. But Lavert Hill, I believe, was one of the guys who was there. I'm watching reps with Chase Claypool and Benjamin Victor. I'm watching Xavier Kelly, who was a 5-star defensive end who ended up committing to Clemson. There were so many guys there. Names that just, I can't think of them right now. Joshua something, who played for Florida State, defensive end. You can probably refresh my memory in the comments. But, I mean, it was a star-studded event. You had plenty of Michigan commits. You had Michael Onwenu. You had future guys who were seen as future stars, Jaraymond Hall. Even though some of these guys didn't necessarily pan out, I mean, this was a who's who in the recruiting world. I mean, Barton Simmons and Steve Wiltfong were there. This was just a monumental event. Watching just even the interactions between DJ Durkin and Urban Meyer and Greg Madison, Urban Meyer. Maybe that was a precursor to things that would come. But just watching those different interactions. James Franklin came up and introduced himself to Steve Lorenz and I randomly. It was an event, but most importantly, there was just so much recruiting power. not just because the schools themselves were there, but because the recruits were there. I mean, you had all these in-state Detroit guys, but I mean, you had other guys that came from like really, really far away to be a part of it. The next year, I don't remember any recruits that were at the 2016 version, which took place about 3 days before I was officially official at 24/7. I had already been unofficial for a year plus at that point, but that was where we got to see Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh standing and evaluating guys together. Now, this is important because it lures people to Michigan, right? It lures people. It's a lot better if you can have it in Detroit. No offense. I thought the Big Rapids, Ferris State, which is where they had it last year. They've had it at Grand Valley. They've had it a couple different places, but having it return to Detroit, because Michigan, except for Wayne State, whose campus it was on, that's where it was in 2016. In 2015, it was at Dakota High School. This makes Detroit a destination. It's bigger than your opening regional, right? Your rivals regional. It's a mega camp. And unfortunately, I didn't get to stick around due to the error of everything. Once I realized, okay, these are two separate camps and I have to, I made a promise that I would be back for the second one. So I didn't get to watch Bryce Underwood. He was the 5-star that was in attendance. I confirmed that he, in fact, was there. Boo Carter was there. Boo Carter was, as soon as I saw Michigan commit Jacob Oden, and he was there, as soon as I saw Jacob Oden, I didn't see Boo Carter leave his side. So for a guy who's been trending more and more to Tennessee, and I have his numbers up here. 2 predictions to Tennessee. He's from Chattanooga. He's a 4-star according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, number 240 overall, the number 20 athlete, number 3 in Tennessee. He has just kind of steadily been around that region. He's been as high as 240, which is the highest he has been. He has been as low as 301 as far as his ranking. So he's been kind of all over the place. But he was a guy that we talked about back a couple months ago when I put him in my best guess list, and then started seeing him trending towards Tennessee. Now you have him again in Michigan during the summer. That's an important thing. And whether he made it to Ann Arbor or not, it's important. But I mean, I think it's just as important to kind of see the surrounding areas and see that a big positive event taking place right there in Michigan's backyard. So not a whole ton of talent yet, but when you have something that was as big as this with as many guys, it's going to continue to grow. Now, recruiting has changed a lot since even 2015. In the last 8 years, there's a lot more of us with NIL and all this kind of stuff. And the bigger guys, I don't feel like they're necessarily camping as much as they did once upon a time. Some guys do, and still, it's a great networking event, not just for the us in the media with some of the coaches, but honestly with the coaches, with some of the high school coaches and some of those guys that are all there. It's just a really great thing to see it kind of come back alive and thrive a little bit. So I think that's great. And that's exactly the type of thing that the state of Michigan needs and the University of Michigan could really benefit from. Because as one person that I spoke to, who you all know, if I mentioned his name, every single one of you, said that, remember, the fact that this isn't what it used to be is in large part due to Jim Harbaugh and the satellite camps and the NCAA's reaction to it. So just the fact that it seems to be returning, that is absolutely huge. Hopefully it just continues to get bigger. All right, so we talked to Jim Harbaugh for an astounding 25 minutes. And normally I would lead with that, but I still am just feeling the buzz of the camp, and I felt like I needed to explain, kind of set the scene somewhat. So let's get into the Jim Harbaugh, best to my memory. I haven't transcribed it yet because I've been just running around, and if I sat and transcribed it first, this wouldn't be out until 2 a.m. And I wanted to try to at least get it out in the calendar day. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to talk about, I talked to, I think, 4 or 5 different guys at the Will Johnson camp. We'll get to that momentarily. But know what? You can make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. We are in the finals, folks, because right now, new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's right. It went up. It was like $1,000 last time. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So many things that I love about FanDuel. Great promotions every day. They've got a safe and secure app, and almost the most important, aside from the fact of, well, actually not almost, it is the most important, get paid instantly. That's what you want. No better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, I'm going to stumble over some words here and there because I have been up for 16, I've been up and working for 16 hours, working or driving. So if I stumble a little bit, that's just going to happen. Zuri is very happy to have me home. He was more interested in the fact that I bought Taco Bell for dinner. Kind of weird that Taco Bell is kind of one of the healthier options you can go to if you're trying to get something insanely fast. If you order the right thing. It's bizarre. Anyhow, let's get into Jim Harbaugh. Like I said, he talked for 25 minutes at this camp. Not talking about talking to the campers, which he wasn't even supposed to talk to the campers. He was listed as parents only. Didn't show up to the parents only session. We were sitting there watching PJ Fleck and Jim McElwain and Lance Leipold. I told you this was a big event. There were a lot of guys there. Brett Bielema was there. Mel Tucker, your favorite. Ohio State was one of the only ones that was actually fully absent. Not one Ohio State staffer there. But nonetheless, seems like they'd want to be there for Bryce Underwood, but they weren't. That said, last year, I believe Jim Harbaugh talked for about 13 minutes at the camp setting to us reporters. I haven't been to any of the other ones where he gave a smattering. There wasn't like one media availability with him in 2015. I think there was like 3. It was just kind of like whenever there was a lull, it seemed like, Angelique had one, Nick Baumgartner had one. I was part of another one where my friend Vito asked him about what his thoughts on dad bod, because he had recently had the shirtless down in the South football game, and he had said, I haven't decided yet. Nonetheless, the only times I can recall us getting Jim Harbaugh for 25 minutes in any one given setting was any of the Monday press conferences in 2015 or 16, and then not again until this last year. And again on the Monday press conferences. Never out in the wild have we gotten him for that long. He always seems very reluctant. Completely different demeanor today. And I think in large part is due to the confidence he has in his team right now. He seemed downright giddy. Like, he did not seem in any rush to get out of there. Somewhere around the 19-minute mark, he was double thumbs up. I'm going to go ahead and move on. And then got asked another question, stayed for another 6 minutes. I mean, that's an eternity in Jim Harbaugh time. And there were a lot of different things he had to say. We're going to, just so you know, we're going to parse things a lot more in one of the 2 episodes we're going to release on Friday. We'll get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty, but I want to give it a 30,000 foot view here with some of my takeaways. So I have to address the one thing that's probably the most important, in that he was obviously asked about Shemi Schembechler and Matt Weiss. He didn't really comment on the Matt Weiss thing. The investigation is still ongoing there. But with Shemi Schembechler, he said that they had no idea. They had hired a vetting company, the company that does all of that, and they did not. They didn't come up with anything. And he was appalled when he saw the tweets that he was liking. It said, we can't have that. We are for everybody. And he said that they have since fired said vetting company. Take that for whatever it's worth. But that's the only down thing that kind of was addressed here, because everything else was just like, oh, man. So everybody eats. That's one of the big takeaways I had, because he was asked about, how are you going to handle it with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards in the same backfield now that we've seen what both can do, assuming Blake and Donovan are both fully healthy. And he's like, everybody eats. We're going to, we're trying to get them each about 10 touches. We're trying to get Cornelius Johnson about 6 touches, Roman Wilson about 6 touches. Remember, JJ's going to do some things. He's going to, not only throw the ball, but hang on to the ball. We got to get Colston Loveland a certain amount of touches. And he's like, that I feel is very, very dangerous for any team to defend. And he's like, the whole thing though is we want to spread it all out. We want to get everyone involved. We're going to keep everyone fresh, but we're going to get everyone involved, and it's going to be impossible to defend. I mean, he's got a point. Now, I know a lot of you are wondering, does that mean they're also going to throw more? Well, he said last year, we were maybe 60-40 in the run pass. Said this year, he's like, I would bet you we are going to be 50-50. Like, we're going to get the running backs the ball, but we're also going to air it out a bit. We are going to, as far as attempts, we are going to make sure that we are utilizing all of the weapons that we have. So, on the right track with all of it. He said that he believes he made a bold prediction. He made several bold predictions that at least four Michigan assistant coaches will be head coaches by this time next year. So he refused to fully admit which ones, aside from Sharon Moore and Jay Harbaugh. You could probably look down the list and say, well, Jesse Minter. I mean, TBS just had him as one of those guys. Could be Clink Scale. It could be Mike Hart. There's all kinds of guys that certainly could be vying for that. I mean, obviously, he's always talked about Grant Newsome being that type of guy. I think he needs a little more time on task before anyone hands him the keys to the Cadillac, so to speak. But I mean, that was a big, bold prediction that he had. He's really impressed with the way JJ has ascended. He really just looking around the team now that they have the full team. He's like, I thought that we had a really incredible spring, and JJ in particular. Like he said, well, if you go back and watch some of the practice stuff, and we're like, okay, we haven't seen any of that. He's like, okay, all right. Well, what he's doing in practice is so unbelievably impressive, and it's just continuing to get better. And the team, he's like, we felt like the team was in a great spot coming out of spring, and now it's even better. It's wild. So, if right now it just feels like walking away from that press conference, it's like, well, it wasn't a press conference, but gaggle. Just feels like it's going to be really, really difficult to bring this team down. Again, all the knocking on wood, all the caveats apply, but injuries and such, more knocking on wood. But it really does feel like this is a team. I've never seen him this giddy in an offseason, ever. Just floating on air. All right, we are going to continue on. I want to talk a little bit about the Will Johnson camp. There were several players there. I'll try to see if I'm going to go down the list and tell you who was there. Not everyone that was on the list was, but got some really interesting things from a couple of the people I talked to there. So I can't wait to share that with you. Stay tuned for that. All right, so obviously we are going to delve way deep into all of this stuff. This is going to be like, you're going to be able to read all of this on Wolverines Wire within the next couple days. Maybe not necessarily by tomorrow, but certainly you're going to be able to read a lot of it tomorrow. You'll be able to read much more of it over the weekend. Some of the stuff I got directly one-on-one. So it's what we're going to try to do. I don't know how the audio is on the video. I haven't been posting videos that much of these player interviews. Some of it had music behind it, so it's kind of hard to post it anyway. But if the audio is good and I can clean it up a little bit, we'll work in some of these player interviews I had at the Will Johnson camp. First off, I do want to say how cool is it Will Johnson already has a camp. There was probably 100 some kids that partook in this. There were 21 Michigan players listed. Not all of them were there that I saw. Let's see if I can pull up the list real fast. So the current Michigan players who I did see there, Will Johnson, Colston Loveland, Mason Graham, Jaden Denegal, Alex Orji, Keon Sabb, Miles Pollard, Cody Jones, Kenneth Grant, Tyler Morris, Amarian Walker, Brandon Mann, TJ Guy, CJ Stokes, Makari Page, Raheem Anderson are the ones that I saw there. There were a couple other guys that are listed here that I did not see. I find it highly unlikely that they were there. But I also did speak. So I spoke to Will Johnson very briefly about the event. And he's like, this is, my parents said that this was something that certainly could be in our wheelhouse. We've thrown camps before. Deion Johnson has certainly been heavily involved in SMSB. I mean, Curtis Blackwell had kind of stuck around. Tyrone Wheatley had stuck around. You're not going to believe this. Jermaine Crowell was there, former Belleville coach. So they had those guys, but they were mostly being coached up and pushed through drills. And we're talking kids that were mostly, they're youth. We're talking middle school age. They're being pushed in drills by current Michigan players, which is really cool when you have that many Michigan players doing it, right? Like I've seen the CE Stars, Chris Evans thing, but that was always Chris Evans, right? It's all, I've seen a couple of these camps where it's one or two guys, maybe it's 10 guys at max. I just listed off 18 guys. So that was pretty cool to see them. And plus, that sharpens your football skills. If you can teach something, it gets that much more ingrained. That's a psychological fact. So certainly being able to communicate things important. So the players that I spoke to, Will Johnson just basically did what I just said. And I talked to Keon Sabb. I talked to CJ Stokes. That dude's just incredible. I talked to Colston Loveland as well. I feel like there's another one in here that I talked to, Derek Moore was there. I didn't even mention him. Derek Moore wasn't on my list and he was there. One thing, okay, we'll just go through him a little bit. Derek Moore, there was a lot of hand wringing last year about he's unhappy, not getting on the field as much. Like he thought he was going to be blah, blah, blah. That, according to what he said, that couldn't be any further from the truth. Like he was like, I felt like I got on the field a lot and I'm just disappointed I wasn't able to do more with my opportunities. When it comes to, I said, who do you look to when it comes to, improving your game? Like who helps you the most? And he's like, really, I'm just really internal about it. And like he said, like one of the biggest changes when he arrived a year and a half ago, he didn't really talk to anyone, doesn't really like bonding with his teammates and whatever. And now he feels like he's a part of it. Like he is within the mesh of the community inside of Schembechler Hall. And it's like, okay, are you ready for your breakout? And he said, well, it's not really something that I think about, I'm just trying to get better. Humility. That's a good thing. Speaking of humility, CJ Stokes, I missed the press conference. The only press conference that I've missed, Schembechler Hall press conference or Chrysler Center, depending on where it was held, that I have missed for football since I started covering the team summer of 2015. Only one. Obviously, I missed some road game post game in that first year because I only went to 2 of the road games, but it's the only one I missed. So I can see why everyone was just kind of raving about it. Like I meant to have only 3 minutes with him. I talked to him for 7 and I didn't really ask him that much. He just had a lot to say. And, he said, hey, that after those first couple games, you were a big fan favorite. And he's like, well, how much does that matter when I fumbled the ball against Maryland? I was going to bring up the fumble. He brought it up on his own. And he's like, that's just not that, it's not who I want to be. And he's like, and that's who I wasn't in practice. He's like, I almost never fumbled. He's like, and some of the things that people don't see is I was ripping off 50, 60 yarders with regularity in practice, but I didn't get to do that in games. He's like that. So that's my next step is to do what I do on the practice field in games. I asked him about how, you're on the depth chart theoretically, obviously behind Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. And he's like, we're all on one team. I don't really care about that. He's like, we're on team. We want everyone to be successful. We want to win. And if I do what I'm supposed to do, then I'll get those opportunities that I want. And I just have to make the most of those opportunities. The head upon his shoulders, right? He's, he was aware. He's like, people didn't even know who I was, right? I was a 3-star out of, half the country away. No one saw my games. He's like, no one knows I knew was what I was ranked. So now it's my turn to come in and make the most of my opportunity. And I'll tell you what, I walked away from that being like, maybe he should be starting over Blake Corum. I mean, not really, but I mean, it was just, it's weird because it was a humility. He didn't say any of this out of like, I'm so good, I bust out 50 and 60 yarders. He's just stating facts while being really very humble about it. I mean, I am really rooting for that guy. So I talked to Keon Sabb as well. And, it's another guy who was just kind of biding his time, right? Almost went to Clemson. You have to thank Texas for hiring Brent Venables for that one. Thought Michigan was a really good fit. Really just kind of biding his time. Feels like he's growing into being a leader. That's something that's really important to him. And that's really the only thing I can really take away from him at the moment. And so then last it was Colston Loveland, and he feels like the tight end room is stacked, but has big shoes to fill, of course. But he feels like he's, it's like, oh man, I don't know if we can fill the shoes of Luke and Eric and Joel, and then you ask him like, oh, how's the room? You got you and AJ, and he's like, oh, don't forget, like we've got Hibby, we've got Marlon Klein, we've got all kinds of guys. He's like, you have no idea, like this is really good. But again, a confidence. I felt a confidence in speaking to these guys. And this is it. I don't want to say this hasn't necessarily been the case, but it's a confidence mixed with humility, which means that they continue to work, right? And especially with these guys, some of these guys are young. They're really starting to come into their own. It's I think that this has a potential of being just a really insanely good team. No dissension in the ranks. Everything you want. Very excited. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We are doing 2 tomorrow, and then we will do Saturday. We've got loads of stuff to get through, so we are going to do that. So we got the mailbag. Get your questions in. That'll be the latter of 2 on Friday, and then we're going to do a Saturday episode because I want to make sure that we cover all of this stuff, because this was all important stuff between Jim Harbaugh and these players. I mean, we're going to get into it into next week. That's how much material we have. I mean, we might not even get to these players until we get through the Harbaugh stuff, which might not be until Wednesday next week. That's how much we have to work with. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon. Peace.